Hello, 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 hello. Um, I just got one of these um writes that I did about about 2 months ago. Yeah, 2 months ago, end of June, that I kept for like just. I just felt like this one was an important one. That it's like one of those cerebral writes that I just feel like if you can get something from this, even though I'm not highly like tangibly like speaking to you directly about anything specific, but I felt like this is part poem slash deliverance slash like what does it look like between in between the lines of how I distill myself and what's my perspective when it comes to people speaking and um, what comes out on top as far as like priorities and what really makes sense as far as like all the things that I'm going through psychologically, mentally, or like just how my life has come about and how I wanted to portray it and all the little lies I made since I was a kid to maturing, um, to making sure that I'm not hiding values as opposed to putting a light upon just putting a light up. And yeah, I just feel like sometimes things should be spread out because we all are going through certain things, and I feel like you know if you can fill in the space and the gaps with things that you I think that's probably one of the coolest things is when you do have like a value that you know is to be true to your life, and then it becomes um, not appropriated, but you actually get proliferation, and you get a sizable amount of return. Sorry to sound business-like, but it's like you get a really good sizable amount of return of like what you truly believe in and what you think comes out, after all the BS ugliness, and then after all the goodness and all the things that you learned and appreciated and hoped for and lived through, and all the memoryscapes that you had and divinity and refreshments, and just what is possible with God and with people around you, your family, and by solitude. So I just say that I just start right now. I say a highly idealized sense formed from original constituents, or does it reap from something better? Words that mean more than better. The formation developed by consequences of both disbelief and of higher reasoning, although this was preeminent by a condition that is closely linked to compassion, love, and deliverance. The forbearance of recognized dissonance is not because of lacking materials, talents, or otherwise. What could come about the mystery of both the entailment of precision as well as the light-hearted muse of generations that applied their own grace that could have been rotten based on the industrial manufacturing of mass trekking. Regardless, life has moved on through a process that is considered to vehemently decide the path one may choose. These are many calming factors that may dilute and subsequently dull a person to favor a want or need of another. However, if then the persistence of a calming factor is where it will be modulated to have even a greater response with the aptitude of, I did say of dear concern. I actually like to think of that as what is probably what I could think of right now, but I think the aptitude is actually quite clear many of the times, and I think that line doesn't have to be digressible. It could be just what tangibly happens based off how structured you are as a person. Um, and for me, it's a lot of times when I'm most joyous, I'm most clear-minded, uh, when things are making sense all at once, and when things are just appropriate enough for me to realize that. I'm not going too outside of myself. I'm right here. I'm right here. So the hope is not to test others of nothingness. The hope was to test oneself, push oneself so much that options were limitless. The writer, the nuances. Oh, actually, so the writer, the nuisance, and the real representation are in flux with those that have their own opinions, and more importantly, those that are willing to contribute in a way that can directly proportion the ideas that matter the most, or what they thoroughly represent. I had a want for many of people, but the discourse is that quantity does eventually reach quality, and much like the quality existence pertains to each one person. Um, so I actually ended off by saying where your form of inspiration comes from is the opposite of control. From a loose cannon to precision that goes beyond man-made science. And next stance I say is different styles can be more appropriately manageable. Choosing from the depths of conviction, even the original will have to consider. And next stance, I wouldn't talk about friction without knowing what are the optimum standards. There will be days when you will have to decide that. So there's a lot of things that I like to point out, but when it comes to these last three, where your form of inspiration comes from is the opposite of control. I think so many of times people would want to regulate how things are because yes, I was talking about here, but once you're here, trying to push yourself, you're gonna remain here. Like I think to a suggested point, yes, the common sense is that you're gonna have to go beyond and outside of the box. But how do you do that when you know you understand the finiteness of control? Control people, many people think control is a bad thing. Um, and then I'm not advocating for control. I'm saying that control can be almost a systematic approach if you have that standard, or control could just be your parents. So it's like, yeah, I like to talk about these things, but you do understand how many things can control you and can't. And when you go outside of that control, it gets dangerous and it gets a little indecent sometimes, and it could be very uncomfortable. But I think you always want to be something that represents something way more of quality than what's indecisive or unreasonable or almost a conceit. I think opposite of control will allow you to become more of your face. I mean, more of your love and grace. But I think you should always know that, there is still going to be control involved. So it's not like, once you get to a certain extent, you're like untouchable. And so, like, those kind of things, like, I think a lot of people deal with that. You can just use security escape as like, you're wanting to make some money for yourself, and hey, once you make a whole bunch of money, no one could really tell you anything. Like that's a pretty cool thing, but once you reach out of norms and once you reach out of a certain structure, you know, beautiful development is always going to be there. Where you're going to go with that, I just meant that as a form of inspiration. I'm not going to detail that too much. Um, from a loose cannon to precision that goes beyond man-made science. Yeah, so man-made science is really good for what it is, and I think, quite frankly, it could be mixed in with so many different different stances as well, just to explain how things are. Because based off hypothesis and uh, continued revolutions, then you're always going to have something that makes you believe in something that's quite in reality even man can't explain anything. So it's like then you start to think about, well, what else is there outside of control and non-control, um, and then maybe that fear is warranted based off your own successive. ideal is like, oh man, I feel like I'm just not that good because I can't think of myself in that way. And so that's where the level headed of control kind of becomes almost like a paper thin piece, because you're like, dang, I could put myself out there, but I need to be knowing that somebody has been through the same thing. But um, sometimes, like I said, that it could be it could almost be gray, or it could be very dark at sometimes. But I'm saying you want to just, if you are on a point where you're in loose cannon, might want to step back. But if you're coming to a precision like Iron Man, then I would say that pushing yourself to the ethical point of view, um, I think those things do become a reality once more, and so that's why I say that it's a circular revolution, because it's going to become almost to a point where I feel like that control is like God seated, like God is just gonna be there a lot, um, for you at that point, but it's almost gonna be like either reality check, or you know the hope is so much higher. The hope is very much higher than what you can sometimes even originally imagine, because you were in a space of temporal, almost conditional point of stance, that everything has to be equated through explanation and a regard of common explanation. So I leave it at that. The middle one that I talk about is different styles can be more appropriately manageable. Um, Choose from the depths of conviction. Even the original will have to consider. Like, yeah, like this one is like so much more of a producible livelihood, I think, and you know there are people that I actually think. I mean, there's like a particular person I could think of, like, but it's like, how far would one person need to go to inspire others when you take care of your own, and when you take care of your own very precisely as well, and when you take care of um, your what I feel like God-given leadership as well, and making that appropriately manageable is something that I would think is probably one of the hardest things, because first, you're on top of the game. Secondly, like, even if you make one little issuance, it's like, okay, now I gotta do this or that. Like, if that's what it is, and I gotta say, like, that's a difficult space, and one part of that is really understanding like what that can mean for other people too, and those teammates that you really had to be a part of, and the just even like, even if you had music involved and different genres involved, but you knew classical music or rock and roll or hip hop. I don't know which one is actually the most original, but I do know that they all have styles that continued off of something, and and finding inspiration in that is quite remarkably beautiful too. And I don't know how people work in that way, because I feel like that's a consistent wave. I think that's a very consistent wave. And for me, I mean, I'm just talking about work alone right now, and work is just, it's a different kind of work. It's not even explainable work. So what I could tell myself to other people about how I do work, it would start with teamwork and leadership and trying to be able to evolve people. But the most difficult process about that is like, I've seen people get to a point where they're so optimized, but then it's like from that point on, it's like, I don't know where this is going to go, because of the fact that, we're not at the top of our game. Um, and it's not to say I'm not pissed off about that control. It's because, yeah, the world got turned upside down based on my own perspective of what God did for us. But I do think, when it is turned upside down, management in that sense is even more needed. It's even more supported. It's even more consequential, because you can't have somebody be that good at what they do and say F it. Just, you know what I mean? But at the same time, enjoying how the process goes in a different finite a different perspective really does do value. And my own, advice to that is like I would try to embrace as much as you can without going out of your norms that you core believe in and that you really have a difficult, resounding effort to say, hey, look, I don't want to be a part of this. Like, if you could do that and you could say that when you're even keel and when you're sober and when you're definitely defining how things are going, I think, all to it to how I believe that middle person is, which I feel like I've been accustomed to, and that's really what my um, that's really where a lot of my qualities had been distributed from. But um, I think, yeah, it's beautiful when you do have a lot of numbers with quality, and I just think, yeah, the world is changing because of this. The world is changing because of how this moves and how people react and how close, the real ones are starting to understand this thing is, and how much, we kind of like step back a little bit, and so because we all have our own, ways of gracing each other, I guess, and wanting to be um, relevant in the skills that makes us at the top of our games. Um, so the last one I would say would be I wouldn't talk about friction without knowing what are the optimum standards. Uh, there will be days when you will have to decide that. So friction is one that I actually wanted to just specifically talk about on its own because friction um, is one of those lovely words that could mean so many bad things and so many good things. And it could start with a mental aspect, but it could obviously start with the physical aspect. Friction when it comes to scientifically talk about this rubbing and this, and it becomes hotter, and things start to warm up, blood starts to get going. You start making choices based off of that, like that directiveness is something that you always got to be a part of if you are real about yourself. But somebody who waits, somebody who takes their time, is patient about how they, modulate themselves, they may have their own stance about everything that they've already seen, and witnessed and perceived and been through. It's just, it's not necessarily the defeating of, time. It's more so where does it go and how does it work and what is it pertaining to, and what is actually that solution, because problem solving is something that I thoroughly enjoy since I was a kid. It's just friction. Some people might not even have a want for a solution at the end of it. Friction is just something that people love to do, kind of like competitive sports, kind of like, and so that friction in and of itself is there, that competing value. But of course, in competitive sports, you want to win. So what makes you go when you know that you've got to come clash to clash with these people that necessarily, you don't really vibe with, you don't really do nothing with, but at the end of the day, they could be good people, or at the end of the day, they messing with your stuff. It's just they don't know exactly who and how far and how deep you went with it. So it's like, what are you gonna do when it comes to friction point? And then what's gonna happen when you have frictionless, like no friction at all? Because yeah, you were at that scientific helm where you said, like, man, I did so much. Like, where is this ever gonna innovate in it of itself? Like, it's gonna innovate so much more quickly and so much more fast paced wise, because of that threshold that you surpassed. Like, what can you do when you can make movements, based off how well your mind works, or how well your body works, or how well your spirit works. So like I've tangibly been thought, like, without knowing the optimum standards, that's a good one because um, it kind of keeps you on your toes. And you don't even have to like really regard anything if it's in a lighthearted manner, light-burden manner. And so when that happens, you can't really say like um, how far anything's gonna go. You just gotta be yourself and be comfortable and don't worry. and be in lively communion of how well things happen. And if you can do that, like, sky's the limit. Like, it's boundless, but friction, does occur in every kind of way to think about it. Friction, friction, even when shoot, man, well, even when you breathe, even when you breathe, comparative to when it's really hot. So, like, that's not friction, but I like to think of it as in a more beyond science regard. Like the Matrix, Morpheus, he said, is that air you're breathing? No, not necessarily. Like, my friction is like, I kind of don't even want to tell you that, because that's how I got to my past. Like, that's how I got past so many things. But all the frictionless things is like, I expressed so many different other things that I felt like was the same thing. So it's like, what makes certain things hold value at that important part of time. I think, once that thing happens where, it just has to happen, because that's just how it's gonna happen. I don't want to really say that, but it's like, it's bred to be in that way. Because I'm looking for some phrase, but it's just particularly well that things happen in a way that, if there is a friction where um, somebody's really a part of something, and then they have a want to look at it as experience, and then they say, hey, look, this is how experience molded me into something. Like, friction can really develop how you perceive and understand what that's going to be about once it pertains to you after a consistent amount of time. That's why it is very cool to have the other two regards that I talked about previously, is because, you know, I'm not talking about friction in ways that may doubtfully hurt me, because I actually got past that. And it's the friction that actually makes me realize, like, there could be so much kind of prominent values when it comes to what is important. And that directedness I was talking about is like, it can get kind of iffy if you're not comfortable with yourself. It can get kind of diluted if you're not mature and doing what you say, or what the person that is in charge of you is telling you to do. So I think that if you have a really good grasp on how things work, you're going to start to understand that you may have to, really talk to that person, really come about and see how this works, this kind of thing works, because friction is supposed to be effortful, full of effort. But friction, um, what happens when friction becomes like kind of like really a good effortless stance is like, dang, man, then how does that work? Then how does that work when that person could do it that well? Like, are you visibly trying to warrant for him, or her, because you're totally applicable to the good side, and you're becoming more of that help or support of that good person, or even more so, a real person in that person's life. Like, these things, you know, I've seen across the board, and it makes so much sense, because I think that, when I'm looking at how much there are optimum standards, you start to think, what are optimum standards? What are things that, would make someone go? What would be a righteous thing to say? What would be loosely spread? What would be fulfilling in many of different instances? Like, I think that when I say there will be days when you have to decide that, like, I think doing things immediately is really appropriate sometimes. But when I talk about friction, it's like, when I look at like the good, heroes and stuff like that, and good characters, and when I look at friction when it comes to people that want to make the right choices, like that takes some time. It takes some time to understand like what's that about. And I think a lot of me in my expose of like when it came to how I felt about certain stances, I went off a little bit bad route. But at the same time, it's like there's seriously certain ideals that you should strive for to make sure that as much as you want to be a frictional person who has their outrights and who has their developed goals and who has their warrants and who has a good grasp on their life too. You're For me, I start to understand friction is less and less of a need. It's not even really a case by case. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm speaking very generally. So it's like when there's a lot of other cases when it comes to friction, like between relationships, and then guy girl relationships, like that gets kind of fun too. But it's more so like how do you respond in that essence? Like, is it real friction, and then is it like negative friction, and then is it like wanting friction? And it's maybe more simplified than I should be right now. But I think you should always have like a difference of appreciation, and a difference of where this could go, because you know I just want to do this off the top of my head, but at the same time, like there's certain things that it is so well oriented once you get to a good mind frame of like how well you can interject into certain things, and how well you know what makes certain things work because you work harder, or when you live out a smarter lifestyle. Like, are you in constant avoidance, or are you in constant deliverance, or are you in constant relationship building? You're just doing it all. If you're doing it all, like I think that one is probably most difficult, because when you carry like so much rapport on so many different things, you shouldn't really become a people pleaser. But I think the good attitude of you is gonna want that, and so it's like then you're gonna say like, yeah, what is set out for certain people is set out for certain people. And like I start to wonder is like, you know, are people really that way just because they really are that way? And like I think trying to make a change and trying to develop people in a different light based off of perspective of what could be shown, that should be kind of a lesser percentage of, as opposed to like who you are definitely, um, in front of what is real, perhaps the lights, and perhaps what is your moment, that makes you go. I guess. I mean, this one is a little bit off tangent, but I guess that's what I kind of wanted to say. But I may want to speak about this in a part two video. So I will leave it at that. Um, I think this thing is really fun because of the fact that, um, when I have memory, when I have my memory, when I have my memory that is inescapable, and when points come up that are inescapable, and it's not inescapable that's bad, it's like points that are so relevant to me, but uh, I can't remember all those things. Like, once that really works out and it defines more and more how one can become, it's like it becomes so much more of like a identification of my own self. So the friction part is like, man, I'm starting to really feel like it's back in the old day where I'm about myself, and I don't really have to, really don't have to talk much, but I don't really have to also, feel like I'm in a discomfort of all the things that I'm learning, how much, I represent of what and who, and how much people actually supported me. to so much of an extent beyond numbers. It's the fact that like I can speak into constant multiples of what I feel like is kind of difficult, actually really difficult to talk about. But a lot of cases, you know, people need full shows or movies or um, descriptive rights or actual research papers and videos and things of that nature, like music and stuff like that, and serious conversations and day-to-day relationships. Like these things that like I would want to speak about are difficult. That I do want to simplify, but yeah, I want to speak into a serious existence. You know, like I feel like there's a lot of that that's out there. But this is my piece, and I think I'll leave it at that. All right, peace out.